All right, hi everybody. How are we doing? Good, good. This has been an amazing day. I want to thank Breeze, Greg, everybody at TACAW, everybody at Aspen Public Radio. This idea came up earlier in the summer of bringing the community together to learn, to educate, to discuss, to celebrate. I know all of you, like me, like Lou, feel so lucky to live here, and we have so many resources around us, and it's just been so great to hear from so many speakers today that are sharing their experiences in the valley and everything that they've learned and shared, and it is a real honor for me to get to sit here with one of my early mentors in my career and talk about all things skiing and ski mountaineering and his new book. So welcome, Lou Dawson.
Thanks, Dav.
Yeah. So I grew up in New Hampshire, and I was a ski racer, and I got to come out to the University of Colorado to ski race at CU. I arrived in Boulder in 1989. And one of the first things that I did when I arrived in Boulder, because I had grown up in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, I'd grown up skiing Tuckerman, I was a Knowles kid, I was a rock climber, is I went to the Neptune Mountaineering in Boulder looking for some guidebooks. And at first I was looking for some rock climbing things, and this might have been in 1990, I can't remember when it came out, but one of the first books that caught my eye was Dawson's Guide to the Colorado 14ers. And I bought that, and I always thought, I've never told you this.
The rest is history.
Yeah, the rest is history. You should have had a subtitle that was like, Your Guide to Type 2 Fun in the Colorado Mountains.
Yeah.
Right? But I didn't know Lou at the time, but I started, I was flipping through that book and learning and realizing that there was so much skiing to be done in our incredible mountains. And at that time I was young. I hadn't taken avalanche courses or anything, but got out there and started doing that. And I know I've thanked you many times for the inspiration, but I'll do it. I'll do it again right here. So yeah, thanks for setting me on the path that has allowed me to be sitting up here with you right now.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's it was always one of my goals to share. That's why I was involved in outdoor education for so long, working for Knowles, Outward Bound, and then the guidebooks were the same emotional component. It was like we've got this pot of gold out there, and I want to share it. I don't want to keep it for myself. And
just to start off our conversation, since we just had that wonderful presentation from the CIIC's Brian Lazar about risk management, avalanche forecasting, you did not have the benefit of that type of education when you started getting into it in the 1970s, when you were young in Aspen and you were climbing and then slowly moving into skiing and ski mountaineering. And as I was sitting there next to you watching Brian's presentation, it struck me like, what would you have done differently if you had known all of these basic things that were up there? Because there wasn't really that information at the time.
I probably would have moved back to Texas. In all seriousness, yes, we didn't have much in the way of avalanche education, but we had some stuff going on in the early 70s. The Forest Service had some seminars they'd teach, and we had some guide sort of certifications. Oh, okay. Message from the management here. We had some guide little certification programs and things like that, but a lot of our education in the 60s, early 70s was about mentors. But I was thinking about mentors when Brian was giving his presentation, and then the guides before with Amos, and we tended to just teach each other, and consequently there were some bad mistakes made. But I remember there was one guy who was a ski patrolman who was about my age, and he'd been on a really steep learning curve. And I ended up hanging out with him quite a bit, and he taught me more than I think almost anybody. I didn't even know what temperature gradient snow was or a slab or any of that stuff. And this guy, because he was a ski patrolman, he was able to get me going on that. It was really great.
There was some great conversation 2 panels ago where we had Kirk Siegler and some of the guides up here talking about the importance of mentorship and having good partners and sharing information. I mean, that's been a huge through line in my life and career as well. how many people in the room have read Lou's new book, Avalanche Dreams? Yeah, okay, good. If you haven't read it, well, they're for sale out there. This isn't a sales pitch, but I loved it. It was deeply personal. It paints an incredible picture of what life was like as a climber and ski bum here in the Roaring Fork Valley in the 70s and 80s, which is something I think most of us really miss because it's not really the same anymore. But Lou, the question is, at what point or why at this point in your life, because this is really deeply personal stuff and
Yes.
reflective, why write this now? I mean, have you gotten to a point where it's about looking back on your career and the things that you've done?
Yeah, you know, a lot of you know that I managed and produced the Wild Snow website for about 24 years. And I did a lot of writing on there, probably around 2 million words, in all seriousness. And I got fairly fluid with the writing, and then I thought, well, I'll tackle something different. And so a lot of that just came from a creative impulse. I wanted to just write, kind of in an artistic sense. But I also thought there was a cautionary tale to be told about avalanches and about having a family in Colorado in the mountains, having a son that grew up that way. How does one navigate that as a parent? I wanted to include all that stuff in my story, so that's what I did.
Let's talk about the title quickly. So Avalanche Dreams, it kind of evokes this idea of danger, but also the allure of the mountains. So can you elaborate on sort of the title? How did that come to you? Was that the title that you maybe had thought about years and years ago? Or how did you kind of blend those things together?
Well, a poet once taught me about book titling, and he said just take a list of nouns and adjectives and put one in one column and one in the other column, and then just start connecting them with data and see what resonates. And that's actually where that came from. But you know, those words came up right away: dreams and avalanches. And the thing about avalanches in my book is they are a memoir is written as a novel. You know, it's got a plot, beginning and an end, a middle. And the avalanche is the specter of death in a novel. But it's also the danger that's beautiful. And because of that, and dreams sometimes have this sort of ethereal beauty to them, I just thought that's the name I want for the book, is Avalanche Dreams. And then the other component is I've had some really bad experiences with avalanches, and I've dreamed about avalanches for years and years. And when we had a child, my wife and I, and he wanted to be a backcountry skier, then I had some pretty scary dreams, real nightmares about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, as a parent of 3 boys, similar to your son Louis,
Yeah.
People would oftentimes come up and ask me, like, are your kids following in your footprint? Like, are they going to be doing what you're doing? And my general answer was no. Like, they ski race, they're great skiers, they do backcountry ski, but I actually didn't want them to follow in the path, as you so eloquently put it, with the specter of death of avalanches out there. How did you and Lisa, as parents, navigate that? I'm asking from just a personal standpoint as a father.
It was tough. One thing we did that we always laugh about is, you saw all the presentations during the seminar here and how dangerous the Colorado snowpack is. Well, our first goal when he got out of high school and really wanted to pursue being a ski mountaineer was to have him move up to the Pacific Northwest and live up there. And he still does, and he skis amazing lines all winter long that if we did them here, neither Dav nor I would exist. So,
Well, you've been doing this long enough. I'm curious how your perspective on risk and being out there in the backcountry has changed? Because I know for me personally, as I've matured, I've almost automatically gotten more conservative, very happy with the things that went on in the past and that I'm still sitting here. Have you had a similar journey with your relationship with managing risk?
Yeah, I think, you know, if you live a long life and have time to experience these things, you live your life as a series of phases or cycles. And, you know, you're young and you do crazy stuff, and hopefully you live through it, and then you develop some wisdom as you get older. And, you know, you'll still make mistakes and that sort of thing, but I really feel like my life, I'm 72 years old and I've done this stuff for a long time, and I really feel like it's just been this series of seasons. And there was the season of the avalanches, and now when I backcountry ski, I prefer it as not the season of avalanches, that it's, you know, the season of going out with my wife and just seeing the beautiful sky and snow and maybe some weather to deal with, things like that.
So if you could jump in a time machine and go back to 1978 or whenever it was that you really started focusing on the snow season or the season of avalanches, with the knowledge that you have now, what would you maybe have done differently? Probably many things, I'm guessing.
I like I said, because of my mentors and the education back then, I think I had a little more knowledge than I was alluding to, but nothing like we have nowadays, exactly. If I had known all this stuff, the one big avalanche I got caught in and almost died, I wouldn't have skied it, I don't think, if I'd known what we know now. And it was, the avalanches I was in Highland Bowl before it was open, and it was caused by the wind side loading, which Brian so eloquently showed on his slides. And we could see it as we looked from the summit. We could see that things were side loaded, and I started going down, which I guess is ozone now. And big slide took me all the way down to the bottom of the bowl, down to the flats.
Kind of a notorious little spot right there.
Yes.
Some of you might remember during COVID, when the ski area is shut down, the Aspen Skiing Company was nice enough to let everybody be skinning. And a lot of people were going up and skiing and skiing in the bowl. But we have to remember at that point, the ski patrol was not up there. It wasn't being controlled, and there was an avalanche just to the east side of Ozone towards G8. And it was like, oh, this is what it used to be like all the time. We kind of take it for granted nowadays.
Yeah, it's the same bowl as if you're up on top of Highland Peak and you look around to the Elk Mountains and you see 100 other bowls. Back in those days, or during the COVID closure, that was the same bowl. Yeah. You know.
Same amazing bowl.
Yeah.
So some of these close calls, these avalanche accidents, have really shaped who you are as a skier, but also as a writer. And you talk about those experiences in the book.
Yes.
When you were formulating sort of the layout, the chapters of the book, how did you decide how much to include that stuff or not include it? Because it's an important part of the timeline of your life, but it would be easy to kind of, you know, dive too deeply into that stuff.
Yeah, when you're writing your story, you know, and you're fairly fluid with the words, you could end up with a book that was 2,000 pages. You know, and a lot of writers have a great deal of trouble with that, overwriting. And indeed, I did at first. I wrote probably the equivalent of 2 extra books that'll probably never get published. They're sitting on my hard drive.
Really?
We'll see what the next generation thinks.
Can you tease us the ideas of these concepts?
It's just more of stories.
Okay.
You know, and the thing about memoir is you need a few stories to illustrate this process of your life and the learning and the trials, but you could have 2 or 3 stories that illustrated exactly the same thing, and that's where you start working maybe with a good editor and you start cutting stuff out so the book won't be too long.
Yep.
It's a process.
So speaking of loss, it's sort of a recurring theme in the book. I know a lot of people in the room here have lost friends in the mountains. We certainly have.
Yeah.
How have you coped with that throughout your life? Because it would be easy to kind of bury it, and it's like PTSD or something.
Yeah.
What
Well, that's
have you done?
exactly what I did.
That's what I've done too.
Yeah.
Not good though.
And I can share that and I still have problems with it, but when I was younger and I was a climber as much as a ski mountaineer back in the 70s, and I had friends that didn't come back from the far reaches, and then friends that one guy died in Yosemite, and we'd have the memorials for these guys, and a lot of times I didn't go. I just couldn't handle it, and eventually I think it was denial, but I'd forget about it, and then it wasn't too long ago really when I started coming to terms with this stuff. It was just a couple of decades, and I realized that I was exactly that. I was repressing all that, and after that I started making an effort to attend the memorials and grieve and go through that process.
I know you've had a pretty deep relationship with faith and religion. Has that been a part of like a coping mechanism in a way, or kind of helping you deal with loss out there?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm a believer, and I believe in an afterlife, and that has helped. That has helped a lot. I can't say it has a specific like effect on the outcome of the worry and the grieving. Like it doesn't make grieving any easier, but it gives me some context for this stuff.
Talk a little bit more about the spiritual connection that you have. Actually, you and I talked about this briefly in my movie, The Ski the 14ers.
That's right.
Thing, in the love of just being out there. Okay, we have goals. We're going to go try to ski this peak, or we're going to try to ski this line, but it should be much more than that. It's about just being out there in the nature, and about being with your friends and partners, and the relationships that you have with both of those things. So, yeah, talk about your deeply spiritual connection.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to get into the nuts and bolts of it, I feel like the wilderness and the mountains are really a manifestation of my higher power, let's say. And the thing is, to me, that higher power is all about love, but it's tough love. And you go out in the mountains and you experience like this fall is beautiful blue sky and the yellow leaves and everything. But then there's another side to that love that's the tough love. And that's where things like avalanches and rockfall and cold come in.
Losing friends.
And losing friends. And it makes it complete, a circle. But it's called tough love, and it is tough.
I think there's the old adage that humans learn a lot more from mistakes than they do from just doing things right. I mean, sometimes you have to screw up out there to realize what you did.
Yeah, you get taught. And then, I remember talking with you about a better word for it is sort of the metaphysics of this whole deal rather than spirituality, when you're sort of listening to the mountains speak to you. Yeah. And I think anybody who's interested in avalanche safety or mountain safety in general, it behooves you to listen to your feelings and see if you can get a sense of what you're getting from the mountain. And you can get all woo-woo about it, and probably so woo-woo that you put yourself in dangerous situations. But I really think that does happen, and you can learn to listen to this subtle voice.
I really love that. I'm a big believer in having fluency out in the mountains. So just like speaking a foreign language, if you're fluent in the language, you pick up on everything that someone's saying to you. If you've never been in the mountains before, and by the way, the mountains and nature in general, they don't hide things. It doesn't hide things from us. All the signs and signals and information that we need as humans is right in front of us.
Well, it really is. Even a deep, persistent slab.
Mm-hmm.
If you know what you're looking for, the signals are always there.
Yeah. So I would encourage all of you this winter when you're out in the mountains to be quiet, look, listen, feel, and think about fluency, because it's something that, you know, Lou is like a shaman in the mountains, and I'm trying to get there. It's like a master's degree that you're never going to graduate and finally get, because you're always learning. But like understanding, looking around, feeling all of those things that are going on around us ultimately will help us make better decisions.
Yeah. Yeah, there's an intelligence that you have that's beyond the rational. It's deep down in your mind, and if you can manifest that and listen to it, then you're going to be much better off. But, you know, a lot of mistakes have been made that way as well. There's a caution to be stated.
Well,
you know.
Speaking of mistakes, I mean, a lot of the conversation or the discussion in your book is around some of the mistakes that you made.
Yeah.
So can you touch on a particular one, maybe a particular instance that was a real lesson for you? I mean, you mentioned the Highlands Bowl avalanche. That's kind of an obvious one of maybe hubris and getting in over your head by yourself. But
yeah.
Maybe there's another good one in there that you could share.
Yeah, I was thinking about that while they were giving their presentation, and I was in the Sawatch, skiing with Andrew McLean. A lot of you may have heard of him. He's a famous skier like Dav is, and Andrew he definitely had the expert halo, you know. And for some reason, I mean, he was a fantastic skier, better skier than I am. And so I was up there skiing some mountains outside of Salt Lake City, and we'd done a pretty big day, a lot of vertical. And we were just skiing down fairly low angle terrain, and we went over a little transition, and Andrew shot over this thing and skied, and I kind of stopped, and then he went way down the mountain. And then I started down, and a fairly large little it's not little's the wrong word, a fairly large pocket avalanche kind of just cut out right under my skis. And I was immediately rolling. And that's a feeling, this kind of washing machine effect you get from a real avalanche. It's hard to describe, but you totally lose body control, your gear, skis come off, all kinds of stuff. And I had no idea that I was even in danger, because I just saw Andrew down there, and it wasn't that steep. But again, the wind had created a wind slab, and that wind slab cracked and turned into fairly big blocks. And there I was laying there. Luckily, I had my gear and was able to keep going down. And of course, Andrew and I just laughed. You know, what else can you do?
Well, did you talk about the circumstances?
Yeah. I said, man, that was pretty scary. Yeah. You know what? Maybe it's a little more dangerous up here than we thought it was. You know, we did have a conversation, but it wasn't. You know, it could have been serious if one of those blocks of snow had rolled over me or something. Yeah. But luckily, that didn't happen. But the lesson was multifold. You know, listen. Stay with your partner, don't get too spread apart, listen to each other, discuss the situation. I mean, there's a million lessons in every mistake.
Yeah. No, I've oftentimes used the analogy that if you're going to decide to be a ski mountaineer, or a backcountry skier, and you're going to do it a lot, you need to be ready and be ready internally for dealing with that situation, for getting caught in an avalanche, how you're going to get out of it, what your partners, what your team's going to do. There isn't, so the analogy that I use is if you're a professional race car driver, you're going to get in a car crash. It might be bad. That's just part of it. If you're going to ski a career in the mountains, whether you're a patroller or just a backcountry enthusiast or a ski mountaineer, these things are most likely going to happen. And so all of that education, all of that learning, all those relationships that you can have with partners, it's so important. All of the safety, all of the gear, the know before you go, which, by the way, if you haven't watched or studied that campaign with CIIC or the American Institute for Avalanche Research and Education, do it, because that's an amazing educational part of what it is that we do.
Yeah, and I'd add that throughout my career, I've always valued having very special, specific partners who I'm very good friends with and communicate super well. And I think that's been a huge factor in my own safety out in this kind of environment.
So you just mentioned communication.
Yeah.
beyond that, what are some of the important attributes of a great partner?
Well, both of you understand the concept of veto. I think I've always really liked that. That if one guy, they don't have, like these guys were explaining earlier, there needs to be no involved explanation. If one person says, I just don't feel good about this, then you listen to that and you respond by deviating from your route, finding another route or something, or having a really in-depth discussion to try to analyze where those feelings come from. But only if the person's game for it, you know, not to put them on the spot.
Yeah, in many ways, it's no different than a relationship you have with the love of your life, your partner, your spouse. You know, that shared investment in each other. Those are the best partners. It's the unspoken communication. And
Yeah,
a little smile that goes a long way, or that like look of, you know, fear where you're like, okay, I
yeah,
see
and
what.
there's a certain thing you'll experience as a ski mountaineer or a backcountry skier when you really get into the sports, where you do have these special partners, and you realize that you're having a really special experience that maybe not everybody gets to have. You know that, and I always think of the analogy of a partnership like two people deep ocean sailing, and just being on that boat and knowing where every rope goes and every sail, and you know when the coffee, all the way down to when the coffee is made, and you know, and you don't even and they don't even have to talk to each other, you know.
Well, it's interesting you bring up sailing, and I'm not a big sailor, but a very similar environment to the mountains, where
Yeah.
the ocean, the wind, the sea, all of that is speaking to you, and it's up to us to kind of see it all and act accordingly.
Yeah, the ocean analogies just go on and on with this
Yeah,
stuff.
they do.
And sailors can just, you talk to a sailor and they're just going to totally relate to what you're doing. In fact, I know a few guys who are good ski mountaineers who are also sailors.
Yeah. Actually, my good friend who I grew up with in New Hampshire, Mark Sinnott,
Oh, yeah.
just sailed through the
Mark.
Northwest Passage, and so he was a
Yeah.
big wall climber, incredible ski mountaineer, North Face athlete, and has really taken to sailing as his new challenge, and has sailed from Maine up through the Northwest Passage, and has a new book coming out. They were searching for the site of this original explorer up
Oh,
there,
yeah.
whose
Yeah.
boat sank. The whole crew was lost,
Yeah.
and that's going to be interesting. It's coming out, I think, this coming spring in 2025. A lot of you in the room have been in the Valley for a long time. You've seen the evolution of backcountry skiing. This sport has been kind of on a rocket ship since,
Wow.
let's call it the mid-2000s, especially with the equipment, skis, boots, bindings. I mean, I won't even go back to when Lou was skiing the 14ers, because that gear was.
It scares Dav
Yeah,
to even
it does.
think about that gear.
But when I skied them all in 2006, I didn't really have backcountry skis. I had Freachy bindings. I had a Solomon rental boot that had a walk mode on it. Really just didn't have the specialized gear. And within a few years, we really started seeing a lot of investment from the big players in the ski and snowboard industry. First ski, and then snowboard after. So I'd love to hear your perspective on this amazing sort of rise to the forefront of backcountry as a discipline in this very old sport of skiing, and the equipment. Not to mention the apps, weather, avalanche forecasting, all of this stuff. It's sort of a different game out there now. But
Yeah,
it's still the same.
I think what I've been involved in the most and watched with the most fascination and contributed to a little bit has been the development of the binding.
You have an amazing binding collection, history
Yeah,
of
yeah.
touring bindings.
Yeah, I got some kind of stupid idea a long time ago that I was going to collect every ski mountaineering binding that's ever been made. And I did pursue it, and Dav's seen the collection. It has about 50 bindings. They're hanging in our house in a special location approved by my wife. I think.
Didn't get to an age where she's like, okay, Lou, we're going to move this into the shed now.
Yeah, into these action packers. You know. But the bindings, they started out in the let's say back in the 1920s, in that era, your ski bindings both toured and went down. They were designed to do both things. They were cable bindings. They had a cable that went around your heel. And then the people realized that for the style of skiing, the Arlberg technique, they wanted to latch their heels down. So that changed everything. We got alpine bindings. And then the ski mountaineering bindings, or the backcountry skiing bindings, I should say, ended up being these sort of efforts at making an alpine binding with the latched heel that was on a big plate that stuck on your ski. And the things weighed a ton. You could end up with the skis and the bindings in the boot of that era. This is, like in the 1960s.
Is that the Silvretta? Or?
Well, even before the Silvretta, there were a couple of things. But you could end up with 12 pounds per foot on your gear. And
that's why guys like Fritz Stamberger were so good.
Yeah, there weren't many backcountry skiers in those days. But no, it was funny, and that's actually a misstatement. In Europe, in the Alps, even with that kind of gear, there were people, pretty large groups of people that were cruising around doing this stuff. But anyway, a guy, I'll make it short, a guy came along and took the plate binding and made it lighter by building in a pivot point in the toe that wasn't separate from the binding. And then this inventor named Fritz Bartel, was this about 20 years ago now, a little more than that actually. Yeah, he took that and inverted it and built part of the binding into a boot that's called the tech binding. And ever since, for these last 25 years or so, that tech binding has revolutionized the sport and the ease of entry and the fitness level that you need for it. And it changed things. I'm trying to think of a good example. It's probably like power steering in automobiles or something like that.
Oh, it was a complete game changer.
Yeah, game changer.
Yeah.
So
any one more question on that topic? Any insights to where we might be going 20 years from now? Because I'll invest. We'll do
magnetism, grasshopper.
Yeah. I'll share one with you.
Yeah.
The use of drones. Now that there's actually personal drones now. There's like there's going to be, and it's not a good trip. There's going to be backcountry drones that will lift you to a slope. You'll unclip, you'll ski down, it'll come back to the location, and you'll be able to do laps. You heard it here. I'm just telling you. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but we're going to see some crazy stuff.
Yeah, is there a company we can invest in, or?
It doesn't exist yet. I think it's going to happen. I want to get back to the book a little bit, Avalanche Dreams. And as in writing a memoir, it's deeply personal. We touched on that a little bit. Were there any subjects or themes in the book that were difficult for you to sort of dive into, because it is so deeply personal, and it's a serious business. This
yeah, I had
skier.
a lot of trouble writing about some of the avalanche accidents. And I mean, I could sit there and write about them, but the trouble I had was wondering if I should publish them, and whether I really wanted them in my book, and then realizing that they had to be in there. And one of the accidents was a ski patrolman in 2008.
That's right. Corey.
Yeah, Corey that was skiing back behind Aspen Mountain and was caught in a very small avalanche, but he was by himself and was buried and couldn't get himself out. And that was it really hit me hard, because I knew he was a guy that just enjoyed the stuff just like we did. He just was so there. And as our son was getting older, and he was in his late teens, and we were trying to get this avalanche awareness thing going. And I thought, when this accident happened, I thought, I'm going to take my son to the accident site the day after. And we're going to look at the hole that was dug. And we're going to get a sense of the seriousness of this endeavor. And we did that. And I thought about keeping it private. And then I thought, no, I'm going to write about this because I want it to be a takeaway about, again, back to this tough love concept.
Yeah, that was a tough day.
Yeah.
If you're skiing on the backside, if you're skiing Pandora's, what do they call it now? Heroes. I'm joking.
Heroes.
There's a run named after Corey Bretman, Corbob, back there. So go find it this winter. He was a special guy. Yeah, those are difficult things. So when you were in your studio or wherever you were writing, I mean, were there moments of emotion welling up where you had to actually step away from the computer or the pen and paper and kind of
Yeah,
reset?
the process of being a memoirist is one of insight and kind of leading the examined life, for sure. You may have been in denial about a lot of things before you started writing, but if the thing's going to be worth being, you'd better get past that denial and look at these things pretty deeply. And yeah, just the history of the avalanche accidents around Aspen, I mean, a lot of it really bothered me.
Yeah.
You know, and it led me to this one thing I emphasize in the book. Well, I don't emphasize it, but I wanted it to be a takeaway just because of the whole story, is just how dangerous these things really are.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, we saw a slide from Brian earlier, Pitkin County being the county in Colorado with the most avalanche fatalities historically, and not just in Colorado, this county in the country, the most historically. So we have to put that in perspective as we approach our plans and our desire to be out there skiing.
Yeah, and when Amos and those guys were talking about this and they got into social media, you know, they were talking about watching people do this stuff and you know,
Right.
the fear of being left out and all that. But you know, one thing I've used to really bother me when I was in outdoor ed was people thought avalanches were just sort of powder snow falling down and you would maybe roll over a couple of times and then dig your way out. And they're not that at all. They're basically, you're falling down a mountain no differently than if you'd fallen off a cliff. But the problem is with the social media, you end up with a lot of really cool footage of people skiing out of avalanches or surviving.
I've been guilty of that.
Yeah, Dav's
like a
a good
stunt.
example. But, you know, nothing wrong with that per se, because you survived out of your own skill, which is pretty cool. But on the other hand, you know, people watch these things and I've talked to people that have really gotten the wrong impression about what you can do with an avalanche. You know the power. You've been dealt with enough of the things.
Yeah, I've been in 2 really big ones. And
Yeah.
It's a car crash that it's going to end at some point, but it was incredibly powerful. Nothing you'd want to go through again. We have about 10 more minutes. I did want to leave some time for a few questions because this is an amazing opportunity. One more thing on the book. You talk a lot about your life as a skier and climber. You talk a lot about spirituality, but you have a philosophy. You're a philosopher, I think. And what are some of the themes that you want readers to take away from this book when they read it? I mean, maybe that's a difficult question because it's very personal, but you're sharing these deeply personal side of yourself. What do you hope people get out of this?
Well, I did have one mantra in the book that I didn't live by all the time. In fact, I had this mantra before I proceeded to almost kill myself in Highland Bowl, but it was operate by the mountain's rules, not your own.
I love that.
And, you know, it's kind of trite and everything, but, you know, but we as humans, especially with the study of heuristics, that's all about operating by the wrong rules, generally our own rules.
That's our rules, right? The human side.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And instead, we need to somehow learn about the mountain's rules and keep telling ourselves over and over again what those rules are and then operate within that sphere.
So before we take some questions, I just would like to get everybody's buy-in that from this winter on, we're all going to operate by the mountain's rules and be responsible. Because we have our wonderful Elk Mountain, Central Mountains snowpack here. We've seen the statistics. It's dangerous, and I think it's up to us as a community and with some mentorship from people to just be going about our amazing skiing and recreation and mountain climbing the right way. Let's take some questions.
Yeah.
Yes. I can repeat. We can probably do it without the mic, and I'll just repeat it if everybody can't hear it. But in the red hat. Yeah.
I didn't quite.
So her question was, she got into backcountry skiing while the Wild Snow site was still up and your guidebooks were still in print and available, both of those things being difficult to get access to now. How would one go about getting Dawson's guides to the Colorado 14ers or going back and looking at the Wild Snow website?
Well, I'm only human. No, the Wild Snow website was a wonderful experience, but everything has a time. And I got older and couldn't keep up the pace, and some very generous people have been involved in purchasing the website from me, and it's kind of moved along through this process. You know, and honestly, I'm not real happy with the website right now because the people that own it aren't really updating it much and everything. So Wild Snow has become an archive of stories and gear information and ideas and essays, just about everything.
And I would encourage you to look on Amazon or eBay for some old copies,
Yeah.
because people tend to put that stuff out there. My book, Ski the 14ers, has been out of print for a number of years. People ask me about it all
Yeah.
the time, but every once in a while they find copies online. So.
Yeah, you can. What you need to do with guidebooks is use it as a way of having a list of routes, but they get dated, and so you don't want to be following the directions to a trailhead necessarily from a 20 or 30-year-old guidebook. And indeed, when Dav was skiing all the 14ers, he was using my guidebook, and I was like, Dav, you can't use that thing. It's already going out of print. So I gave him. I was trying to do a new edition, and I gave him a pile of pages from the printer about this thick.
I didn't get lost too many times.
Yeah.
Just a few.
Yeah, no, you didn't.
Another question out there on the back corner? Artie.
Yeah, so first of all, both of you have been a huge inspiration for all of us, no matter how long we've been in the mountains. And I really appreciate both of your perspectives because they're so different and unique and give us a new vision for what our spiritual connection is to nature. So first of all, thank you for that. And then I had a question for Lou. I was hoping that you would elaborate. I was always curious after the Highland Bowl accident if that mitigated your enthusiasm for pursuing skiing all the 14ers, or if it caused you to be more committed to the project.
Well, it was a while after that I got into skiing the 14ers, and the thing is, being caught in an avalanche like that as a committed mountaineer didn't cause me to rethink my involvement in the sport. I was fully committed, and I love the athleticism of it. I love the mountains. I love the spirituality, the whole 9 yards, and all that. Mainly what happened with that avalanche is, well, a couple of things. When I was lying there in the snow dying before the rescue came, I was thinking about I wasn't married yet, I did not have a child, but I remember really clearly just asking for forgiveness from my future wife and my child, and also thinking about my mother. And after that avalanche happened and I survived, I immediately decided to shift gears and start looking at life as a time to settle down and find a partner, have a family. And that's indeed what happened. But at the same time, I was committed to being a climber and a mountaineer as well. And I was trying to reconcile those two things, of course, because of the risk. And I was a talented enough climber to where climbing on the 14ers to me was trivial. And my ski skills weren't quite so good, but I managed to learn a style of skiing that I think was pretty safe and solid, and got down all the peaks that way. Art's the cover designer on the book, by the way, you guys. So,
Thanks, Art.
Yeah, thanks, Art.
Yeah. That was great. We got two more, one in the center, and then we'll take one in the back. Go ahead. So thanks for those questions. The first one was about all of this great new gear that we have out there in backcountry skiing technology, whether it's better beacons, airbags, apps, different things. A lot of those technologies are reactive. So you're gonna use them when the shit goes wrong. And I want everybody to think about going out there into the backcountry without those things. And what would you do differently? How would you make different decisions? If you were to go on a ski tour without a beacon or without a partner, certainly without an airbag. So I believe these are good things, this equipment,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it shouldn't change the way we make decisions. I personally have gone out ski touring behind snowmass, behind highlands with no beacon, by myself, just to see, and not skiing anything steep, but just to see how my mind reacts to that experience, and it's powerful. I'm not saying you should all do that, but maybe just go up in a low-angle meadow, and it's just a different way to approach things, and that's really the way we should all be approaching backcountry skiing, not thinking, I've got my beacon, I've got my partners, I've got my airbag, I can ski anything. So that was my answer to the first question. Why don't you take the second one, which was,
and to your answer, when I started skiing, we didn't have beacons, and
there you go.
and I think if you don't go out and do it physically, there's no reason you can't do a thought experiment.
It's a thought experiment, exactly.
And just imagine yourself on that ski tour you did the day before, only you didn't have a beacon. And I think it's really eye-opening. I've done that my whole life, actually, and thought about that and gone through that thought experience. But yeah, in terms of expeditions, 2010, actually in 1973, I'd climbed Denali via a pretty difficult route. Took 43 days on this big expedition. It's easier now because of the gear and all. But 38 years later, with a child who was just about ready to turn 20, he and I went up there and we skied from the summit of Denali. And he turned 20 on the mountain. We had a little birthday party in our tent. And that was definitely one of the peak experiences of the mountaineering life. But I have to say that, the other peak experience for me has just been, we have one child, and my wife Lisa and I have backcountry skied for years. We've been married 39 years. And all that time, we've been out there in the mountains, in the Elks and elsewhere in Europe, and just had these incredible, beautiful experiences. And they weren't about risk. They were just about the beauty and the love and the aesthetic of the whole deal. And I just am so thankful for that.
That's beautiful. Agreed. Final question here, and thank you.
So Lou, Dab, thanks for putting this on. I think I just want to thank both of you. You're both so not selfish. You give of your time and you help people to learn. So I'd like to thank both of you for that.
Thanks.
So the question is, what story do you wish now you would have included in the book that you didn't include?
You'll be seeing the story. I've got some bonus material coming up. But let's just say this story is going to be how I made enough money to go climbing in Yosemite for 2 seasons.
Oh, this sounds really cool.
And it wasn't carpentry.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, we'll leave that for the next seminar at the Backcountry Symposium in the future. I want to thank all of you guys for joining us. And Lou, thank you so much.
Thanks, Dad.
It's fantastic.